Good evening, everybody. In my opinion, a truly glorious day to be here. That's my point of view, of course. And bet for many of you as well. You over here, you over there. Truly, we're living in the best of times, are we not? Not the worst of times. And especially for upper middle class Americans, self-entitled ones like me. I mean, in the past few years, these past 6 years since COVID, I arguably haven't had a difficult day in my life. That's just a daily schedule. I wake up, I eat, drink, sleep, game, study, and I do a chore or two here and there. But that's it. My life is stable. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for everyone. For all I know, there's a buddy out there breaking his back as I speak, working 2 jobs a day, occupied all hours from morning to sunset. While I can empathize with people like that, I cannot relate to them. Most unfortunately, we do see the world differently. We see it from different lenses, different perspectives. Perspectives and lenses comparable to how you fellow audience members might see this number right here. Can anyone take an educated guess as to whether this is a 6 or a 9? Well, for your finely educated guesses, that it's a 9. That has been angled exactly 90 degrees to the rightward direction, such that it's ambiguous and could be either number, and there's no way to tell at first glance. But wait. Ultimately, it's the same number, is it not? I mean, sure, you can say whatever you want about stylization and formatting and this little detail yada yada here and there. But in the end, the 9 and the 6, they carry the same shape, shell, and skull, which is that of an oval that has an offshoot attached to itself. Nevertheless, if you had 2 children, for speculation's sake, and you put them on either side of that 9, assuming that 9 were laid flat on the ground as it would be over here, you would find that the 2 children would battle like soldiers. They would dig their trenches, they'd be adamant about their opinion, and unwaveringly they would fight to prove their opinion. For this kid, that they're looking at a 6. And for the child who stands over here, that they're looking at a 9. In part because they're little, but also because they fail to see the other side's perspective. And that brings us to our topic of today. Perspective, point of view, POV. Which is to say that my red could quite possibly be your green, even if we call them the same thing. That my opinions and my perspectives are different from yours. And so are those of even your family members, your friends, all sorts of people you know. Now, I personally feel that the best way to introduce you to this topic is to talk about an old story from hundreds of years ago. Have you ever heard of Gulliver's Travels? If you are yet to hear about Gulliver's Travels, it's an old tale of a young man from somewhere in England, many hundreds of years ago, who took his sailing ships, his convoys, and his galleys to the far-flung edges of the 7 seas, to a land not previously known to man. Now, we don't know where this land could have been. It could have been somewhere between California and the Far East in the Pacific Ocean, or it could have been in the Indian Ocean between Australia and Madagascar. We don't know. What we do know is Gulliver's personal notation of his encounters there. So we'll start here. Gulliver was curious about what he would see in this land, which they called Lilliput. He speculated all sorts of things, but he didn't really know what to expect in the end. But he was curious, he wanted to see how the people there lived, how they functioned with their daily lives, and I'm sure everything turned out just fine. Oh. Okay, so you see, you ran into a bit of a problem there, just a small problem. Such a problem, I just call it desecration, because of how poorly they did my boy Jack Black. Now, what happened there was that he had not known one thing about the land beforehand. The citizens of that land, their perspective, it sits on a different scale from that of our average Western Hemisphere, Eastern Hemisphere, the known world's man. Particularly, in that the average height of a U.S. citizen as of 2026 AD is about 5 feet and 7 inches. That is average, the mean for both men and women. On the other hand, the average height of Lilliput citizens, it's more so around the scale of about maybe 5 inches and 7. I'm not entirely sure what the unit, the scale measure would be, but you get the point. The people of that land were tiny compared to massive Gulliver. And Gulliver was really terribly confused. He did not know why they attacked them, why they tied him to the ground, as he saw in the previous picture, why they pulled out their bows and arrows and brought out their cannons, and to declare war on him entirely just for being a person. It was because Gulliver, he did not understand that he was the foreigner there. Gulliver's perspective was that of a normal human being. His average comparison was that of someone about his height and stature, or within a few feet of it. When he came to the strange land, he saw these tiny people like critters. He assumed they were passive, little creatures. But he did not understand that they saw him as the giant. They saw him as the strange, terrifying creature who was going to stomp every village with his very own 2 feet and destroy everything in his path. They didn't see that. He failed to see that. But that was what they saw, the people of Lilliput. They saw the abominable giant, the monster ready to destroy and to pillage. And it is due to his failure to see their perspective that he got into so much trouble. Nevertheless, to Gulliver, this thing didn't make sense. After all, he wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was just a sailor man, an explorer. He just wanted to see how things operated around here. It doesn't make sense. Nothing makes sense, he thought to himself. Just as the human fear of spiders, for example, doesn't make sense, right? I mean, after all, look at this thing. So tiny. Don't step on me! It could probably fit, not even in the palm of your hand, it could probably fit on the tip of your finger, this spider depicted here, which is obviously 2.5 feet wide as shown in the picture, but is obviously a photograph of a much smaller organism. And even the larger spiders, they can't hurt you. If you leave them alone, they will leave you alone. So why is it that we assume so terribly, and despite the fact that they don't do anything to us, we step on them, we clap them with our hands, because we're afraid of something that doesn't exist, and we fail to see from their perspective. Do you think a spider, these tiny creatures, they look at us, tall, towering humans, and think to themselves, I'm going to take that human down, 3 punches, Muhammad Ali style. No, that's not what they think. As a matter of fact, we don't know what they think. We can only speculate. Because we're unable to see the world from the eyes of a spider. We cannot understand how things work from their perspective. Now, the human perspective matter is a multifaceted idea that goes beyond simple questions as to, for example, the color of this piece of cloth. As some of you might know, they have revealed the color already. It is in fact blue and black. Well, don't mind me, I personally thought it was white and gold. Well, anyways, I call crap. Anyways, it need be that we go to the next topic, which is back to Gulliver, but is on a different and more solemn note. See, Gulliver, he did not judge these people. Actually, he did judge, but not in a negative way as the people of Lilliput did. He saw them as little, they saw him as tall. He saw them as tiny little creatures, people like him, but who lived in houses that could fit on the palm of his hand. However, he was also judged by the people of Lilliput. I mean, that is discrimination after all. They attacked him, they declared war on him in a discriminatory fashion, just for the fact that he was a little taller on average than their people, and thus they assumed him to be a giant. They made an assumption about Gulliver, collectively as a populace, and that drove their decision to take him down with their ropes and their weapons, their bows and arrows, their guns, their cannons. And it brings us to a more serious note of how the failure to account for another person's perspective can impede human judgment in the real world. See, we'll bring an example. Let's say you have a friend. This could be any friend, but for discussion's sake, let's say it's your best friend. Now, your best friend, their mother recently died of cancer. Obviously, you're going to feel terrible for them. You want to help them out, to console them in whatever manner is possible, to tell them all things will be all right, and you do. You come over to them, you give them a pat on the back, a hug, and you let them know that all things shall be resolved. The very next day, as you're reading the newspaper, or as we live in the modern day, your phone, checking the news, you see this. Several people died on the main highway. Someone else out there, actually multiple people died. Truly a tragedy, is it not? But you don't care. You just think, whatever. And hey, that's a completely fair reaction, is it not? I mean, you can't lament over every tragedy that happens to someone, or else you'd be crying all day. It makes sense to gravitate to those who are closer to you. But gravitation to those you know presents a different challenge, as we'll show in our next example. Let's say, once again, you have a friend, but this time they need help with their homework. They don't understand the concept they're looking at. Maybe it's math, maybe it's English, maybe they're having trouble memorizing some ideas with their homework, with what they've been assigned. Naturally, assuming that you're on good terms with them, you go over to them and you give them whatever aid is necessary. You tell them how to memorize things. You fixate their minds on certain math concepts that they might have not been previously familiar with. You make sure they're prepared for next time, in whatever manner you're able to. And you make them prepared for the future. Let's say later that day, you're driving back from somewhere, and you see this on the street. What do we have here? A man in poverty. Stark poverty, truly. And he's a beggar. He has nothing for himself. No home, practically no money. All he has is a cardboard sign and a bag. It might even be times of tough weather. And so you'll question how he got there. Though he's a suffering man and he needs help. He needs clothing. He needs shelter. He needs food and he needs water and he needs a few dollars more. You drive past him and you don't give him those dollars. The reason being, you make an assumption about him. You assume he did drugs. That's how he got there. Or maybe he was too lazy. But those are just stereotypes, are they not? They're just stereotypes. They're just ideas, preconceptions we have of ourselves. And they can pose a tremendous danger. They're one of the greatest dangers of human judgment. The fact that we just tend to assume something about someone. And it gets people, such as this poor man, directly harmed. Despite the fact that we seem to be caring to those within our near circle, we do not care for another man, simply for the fact that we are not familiar with who he is. And with that in mind, I hope we can make a few takeaways here. Gulliver, he went to a foreign land and he was judged for the fact that he was different. He also judged these people for the fact that they were different. But the consequences, on Gulliver's point, they were incredibly stark. They were unexpected on his behalf. And he paid a certain price for it. And these shifts in judgment, perspective, preconceptions, and prejudices, they can cause tremendous damage in the real world. And may we always remember that as well. And so the next time that you're arguing with a friend about anything, whether it be politics, or religion, or culture, or television, or why you think Clash is a better game than Fortnite, whatever it may be, I hope that you can take away this. Perspectives must be taken into account. Maybe they're not the wrong ones. Maybe you just haven't put on their shoes and see how tight or how loose they feel yet. Maybe you just don't understand how they see things, how their eyes might see the same thing differently than you do. And perhaps you are the short-minded one, and you ought to get a good perspective, a good idea of why they disagree. Thank you.